Good Monday morning, folks. It's the 19th of September. September is chugging along. And just for a friendly reminder, Ukraine is only, 11, 12 days away from drafting women. Yes, absolutely. It's wonderful. It's incredible. They are super inclusive. And now they will be drafting women. That's always a good look. That's what the winner does, right? Right. And remember when Nazi Germany when things were going so great for them that they started drafting women? Actually, they didn't draft women. And do you remember when the Spartans, when they had all their difficulties, that they started drafting women, right? No, that didn't quite happen. Historically, you don't draft women. Historically speaking, you don't draft women. Now, women volunteering in Eastern Europe is something that, well over 100 years of establishment there. There were, in World War I, there were supposedly Russian women volunteers of death, or death legions, whatever you want to call them. They were these special all-volunteer battalions of women who were sent to the front to fight as infantry with mixed results. And we won't get into combat records. The Israelis, their women serve. I'll be honest, I don't know enough to know whether it's compulsory or voluntary. But I will tell you, volunteering women is one thing. Active conscription is another. And yes, I got to start off with that. Really, let's talk about what's happening now and how the Ukrainians are changing tactics. For those of you who don't understand, there is a Eastern European, Russian/Ukrainian word. As far as I know, it's the same in both languages. Diversant. Diversant is diversionary. A diversionary troop. This is actually a saboteur or guerrilla, somebody who goes in behind the lines, very similar to partisan, but they're military. They go in, they blow up a couple of things and leave. In this current war, the Ukrainians have what they refer to as DRGs, diversionary reconnaissance groups. These guys basically are like scouts. They go in, they see what's going on, and on their way in or out, they blow something up, do an attack, whatever. And these little groups that do these things, these are, what I guess a lot of people would refer to, and it was one of those watchwords, is pinprick or one-off attacks, is how I say it. A flash in the pan. We're going to do this. We're gonna blow up this. We're going to do that. We're going to kill so and so. These things, to be honest, in combat, they have almost no tactical or strategic advantages, no benefits. The largest benefit from anything like this is you are demoralizing the enemy because you make them understand they can't be everywhere at once. And really, what separates the DRGs from the terrorist bombings in Iraq or Afghanistan, where they would sneak in, set a bomb up, blow up a bunch of people and leave, I'm guessing it's just the complexion or the religion. This is the difference, because as far as tactics, there is no difference. This is the same sort of, the Russians are dealing in Ukraine with the same sort of zealot cowardice that we face in Afghanistan with the same sort of troops. That seems to be one of their main tactics. Their offenses have all slowed down, failed, whatever. As we talked last week, the bridgehead on the Ingolets River is now cut off because of flooding. A lot of videos appeared over the weekend showing where the Ukrainians had dug in, and now those pits are full of water. The only way to resupply the troops on the eastern side of the Ingolets River is with rotary wing assets, in other words, helicopters, for those of you who don't speak military. I would have to say the sad thing about that is there aren't that many helicopters left in the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military doesn't have very many air assets, fixed wing or otherwise. We gave them a bunch of Soviet military helicopters that we had. When I say Soviet military, I mean Soviet vintage helicopters. These helicopters were stuff that we were refitting, repairing, and upgrading to send to the ANA, the Afghan National Army, which we're not going to do anymore because the Taliban run Afghanistan ever since our failed pullout last fall. The great military achievement of the Biden administration and General Milley in the Pentagon. They can't even handle a simple withdrawal from a country without letting turn in and devolve into an entire shit show. That's what that is. You know, I call it like I see it, guys. So anyhow, they transferred these helos to Ukraine, and just about like everything Ukraine gets sent, they immediately start getting blown up by the Russians. The 113s and the Dutch variants of the 113s, they're all scrap metal, or a good number of them are scrap metal. They say 60% of the Polish T-72s that were sent to Ukraine are now scrap metal. And this is a recurring situation. Western aid sends a whole bunch of new stuff, and before long, the Ukrainians succeed in making it garbage, trash, former tanks, tanks, these sort of things. So when we're hearing that the only way the Ukrainians can resupply their troops that are trapped on the eastern bank of the Ingolets by helicopter, they don't have that many helicopters to do the job with. And by all reports, Russian artillery and aircraft are reducing this pocket. Basically, they've got a bunch of troops who can't go anywhere else, and their decisions are either die or surrender, or stall for time and hope the water goes down and then you can run across the river. I guess one of the other more interesting developments in the war in Ukraine has been that Russia is now switching off the power. You know, we always had in the intelligence community, and one of the things people like to point to about how poor and destitute North Korea is, which they are, is the fact that you can pull up a nighttime satellite image, and everywhere around North Korea, including China, is got lights and bright and lit up. And North Korea is relatively dark, other than their capital city. Well, that's the new deal for Ukraine, because there are two satellite images that are making the rounds. One is from a year ago of what Ukraine looks like at night, and one is from this current time of what it looks like at night. And there's a huge difference. There's no difference in Kiev yet. Lviv, however you want to say it, out in the west. It's still pretty lit up. Odessa is pretty lit up, but everywhere else that is Ukrainian-controlled territory is fairly dark. Crimea is lit up. Donetsk is lit up. But the lights have went out elsewhere. And this is going to make it really, really hard for the Ukrainians to supply their army and keep everything going, especially when people are going to be suffering on the home front because they don't have electricity. It's going to be cold this winter, as it always is in winter. And no electric, no gas, no energy. And the Ukrainians are going to have to divert a lot of their resources to look to the aid and comfort and deportment of their citizenry. But I really don't believe that, because the Ukrainians really don't give a shit about their citizenry. They really don't give a shit about whether their people live or die. You can see it how they're throwing their people to the slaughter. And it's great that you want to hear about how Western propaganda, they actually believe, and it's funny, there are people that believe the Russians are having their ass kicked. That is the most hilarious thing of all this. And the propaganda is over the top. On YouTube, you can find it. Russian women press their husbands to bring home war trophies from dead Ukrainians. And I'm like, okay, let's have a listen. These are intercepts that the Ukrainian intelligence claims to have of phone conversations. I want you to listen to it. And then I want you to envision Howard Stern. Because this doesn't sound like a radio conversation or radio intercept that has been picked up, where both voices have the same amount of distortion. One sounds like the supposed husband in this situation. Sounds like he's in a studio, like a radio studio. While the wife sounds like she's part of one of these studio tricks, not unlike John Boy and Billy or any of these other radio hucksters that go out there and put on a show. That's what it sounded like. It didn't sound like anything real to me. It sounded like something that was totally staged. And it was, let's put it this way. And I'm not saying that there aren't crazy people in every culture in every country, because there are. There are crazy people everywhere. If this was real, the supposed wife or lady on this phone, it was pretty unhinged and pretty devoid of the reality from most Russian ladies I've ever spoken with. I mean, I've spoken with a few over the years. In fact, I speak to one just about every day. And she might be, each individual woman is different. But what I'm going to tell you is, as far as the mindsets that I've dealt with over the years, if this was real, somebody's got some serious mental issues, and I honestly don't believe it was real. There's nothing there to make me believe that it is real. So the propaganda continues over the top. I will tell some of you folks who seem to be all in that Ukraine is winning this. Great. There are only two places Ukraine is winning the war: in the media and in between your ears. And welcome to understanding what propaganda is. You're actually giving a lot of us an education on how the Germans, up until the very end of the war, thought they were winning. Because this is the same sort of thing. Joe Goebbels would love this. The Ukrainians are absolutely beyond the pale when it comes to the propaganda. And as we've been talking the last few days, the Russians started targeting infrastructure, the dams, the power plants, lines of transmission, all these things. And they're systematically tearing Ukraine apart. They went in with a soft touch to begin with. They didn't want to tear Ukraine apart. Now, because of Western aid, and that's the only reason they're tearing Ukraine apart. If there hadn't been Western aid, this would have been over a long time ago. But Zelensky and the oligarchs have to show some sort of progress if they want to keep getting the aid. And they're addicted to that Western money. They're addicted to taxpayer money from the United States. And, there are so many interesting things happening in Europe right now, where this aid is coming into Europe and being sold. There was an incident that video exists, and you can hear the German police quite clearly saying in German, "You don't need to film this." It was a bust where they had caught some folks selling stingers that were supposed to, they ran the serial numbers, and all intents and purposes, these stingers, these anti-aircraft missiles, man-portables, were supposed to be destined for the Kherson offensive. Instead, they're in Germany being sold on the black market or dark web. Interesting. Why isn't this in the evening news here? Why isn't it? I can guarantee you, if it was any Republican president, this would be all over the news and it would be talking about his great failure. But being that this is Obama administration 2.0 or the sleepy Joe Biden administration, you're just not going to see it. It's not going to get reported. It's out there. It exists. You can look it up. There's enough people who have the video out there. I've got the video somewhere. Your tax dollars are work. The stuff's being sold off. You're lining Zelensky's nose with cocaine, and the oligarchs that he hangs out with, we're lining their pockets. And this, it's amazing to me. One of the most corrupt countries in Europe until the war started. Now suddenly they're not corrupt and we can send them all the, lepers don't change their spots, folks. And the fact that Ukraine was corrupt and suddenly there's a war, you think that people are actually going to care more about their country than their own pocket? No, in fact, you're about to find out how people in their pocketbooks are when the government ignores it, because this is what you're getting ready to see in Europe. The protests keep growing. These protests over energy and the protests over energy and people just being scared about the future as winter starts to encroach upon the European continent, you're going to see it get worse. And some states in Europe have already decided that they are going to deploy their military to, quote unquote, preserve the peace in the cities. But Putin's a fascist. Yeah, absolutely. Putin's a fascist. You see all those Russian troops on the streets of Moscow, St. Petersburg, Omsk, Vladivostok, Tomsk, Novosibirsk. You see all those Russian troops. And the funny thing is, you wouldn't see them if they existed. You would have to hear about it third party, because we blocked off news from that side of the planet. We blocked off the news from that side of the planet. You're not allowed to hear what's going on over there. Cold War 2.0. We're now doing to Russia what the Soviets did to Russia. We're isolating them. We're separating them. I think it's really ironic. It's ironic and sad that 30 years ago everything was, just so great, that communism was gone and we're going to find a way to reintegrate the Russians into the world society, and it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be fantastic. A new beginning, a new Russia, a new this, a new that. Well, apparently there's not much of a new anything, because the more shit changes, the more it stays the same. Only it's not the Soviets doing this to their own people. It's the West doing this to the Russian people. And I really think, I would guess this is one place that you have to understand Russians aren't Americans. If anything, I can make a big comparison to Southerners being more like Russians. Talked about, dismissed, made fun of, your monuments tore down. Anything that you believe in is bad and horrible, even if you're doing it for the right reasons. This is a lot about how Russia is right now. And I think you need to understand that you can only hold a people down and shit on them for so long. You know, kudos to Russia for standing up for itself. Kudos to Russia. You can't hold a people down and keep them second class as far as citizenry in the world. Isn't it interesting? We're so worried about groups in this country being second class citizens, yet we're going to treat other countries like they're second class citizens of the world, where we have a right to look to our own deportment. They don't have a right to look for their own security and their own abilities. And it's, you know, it's almost humorous how we think so much of ourselves that we're able to do this to everybody else because we say so. There's a certain xenophobia in being an American anymore. We're no longer about truth, integrity, and honesty. No, in fact, we'll subvert the truth. We'll fact check the truth. Nobody has the right to make up their own mind as what is true and what is not. Nobody has the right. We're going to tell you because you're not smart enough. You're not smart enough. And I mean, it's really cool when you have discussions with people. And they're going to tell you that they believe everything hook, line, and sinker about Ukraine. Yet these are some of the same people telling me they believe everything that's being reported about the war in Ukraine. Didn't believe a damn thing about what was reported about COVID. Once again, a leopard does not change its spots. If they were lying to you about the vaccinations, if they were lying to you about the mask, if they were lying to you about all these things, why do you suddenly believe they're now telling the truth? And I think it's very shrewd amongst the press because they understand that there's been so much Russophobia out there. There's been so much of making Putin and the Russians out to be bad guys and horrible people that some folks are just going to buy it, hook, line, and sinker. You're going to buy it. You're not going to question it. And therefore, it's going to be easier to manipulate you. And I want you to let that sink in a little bit. You can only be manipulated if you're prepared to be manipulated. The government is only going to be able to get away with lying to you if you're eager to believe their lies. And I'll give you an example, which is really interesting. Because early on in COVID, and I've said this before, early on in COVID, I took the advice. In fact, I was working on a federal contract as a safety officer, and we were trying to be very proactive. In fact, before there was a mask mandate, I honestly, 100% full disclosure here, I asked the company if perhaps we should be going to mask because nobody seemed to know anything. And what I got back from the company is you're not going to be allowed to wear a mask. The mask don't do anything. The only mask that's going to work is an N95. All this happiness, right? And so that's what was told. Now, 3 months later, No, everybody's going to wear a mask. If you get caught without a mask, you're going to get fired. All these sort of things. The problem was, by the time we got there to the initial mask mandates, I'd already seen that there were too many contradictions. And I do understand that you're charting unknown territory, but there was too much money to be made. There was too much control to be wielded. And it became pretty obvious fairly quick that this was not about public safety. This was about power. And I can tell you this much: News on Ukraine isn't about informing you, it's about shaping your opinion. Just the same way that they were trying to make everybody fear COVID. And be honest, I went out, I took precautions, my parents, not young folks. Look at me up. Look at this. Yeah, so imagine, there are people older than me. I went out and did the shopping for them initially. I went out and went to the markets. I did all that. Now I'm putting myself at risk because I'm out there face to face with the great unwashed, even wore rubber gloves for a little while, right? In fact, so paranoid that I was going to give my parents this bug that I would leave their groceries in the garage. I told them, unless it was like meat that I would put in a cooler or whatever. If the stuff was not particularly perishable, hey, let it sit in the garage for a couple hours and then come get it. And generally I would go deliver the stuff and then call them as I was leaving. It's out there in the garage. When you get a chance, go get it. Well, I didn't want to see them cursed with the great Rona death. Now, there are a lot of you folks that are more than willing to believe that Russia's the bad guy. And you're eager to believe it. I don't believe it. There's a lot of reasons I don't believe it. Why? Part of it's because I know Russians. Part of it's because I've been to Russia. Part of it's because I've worked Russia. There's a lot of reasons why I don't buy it. And the fact that this government and media are so invested in not allowing any of us to see the other side of the line, not allowing us to understand things from the opposite point of view. You'll remember when you were a kid, there's two sides to every story. Don't judge a man till you walk in his shoes. The truth lies somewhere in between. Well, no, it doesn't if you're not allowed to see the other half of the story, the other half of the equation. All I have is one half of the story, and that's this half that my government, who's the largest supplier of weapons to Ukraine, wants me to see. So how am I supposed to get the other side of the story? How are you supposed to get the other side of the story? I know how I'm getting the other side of the story. I'm actually going out and finding the other half of the story. Then I've got to filter through it. And I share some of these things with you folks. And for this, I'm a Russian bot. I'm a Putin apologist. I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. I got one president. Unfortunately, his name is Biden right now. And I didn't vote for the prick. I'm not going to vote for the prick, although I might vote for him in the primaries for the next election just to make sure he runs. I am what I am. And I'm a little more patriotic than some of you folks because I bother to worry about this country. I don't so much trust the damn leadership anymore. The leadership who locked you down, gave your children speech impediments, demanded that everybody was going to have to wear a mask forever, and that you were going to have 40 or 50 injections of experimental substances. I don't trust that because it didn't pan out. And if you trust it and now are suddenly puzzled by, yay, Biden says it's over, time to be done. hey, you guys really need to start doing a little bit of self-questioning here, a little bit of self-diagnosis of what is up with you. Anyhow, that's my morning update. I don't know if I'll post anything this afternoon or not, because everything's pretty much stabilized in Ukraine. The Russians claim they're moving back into Kharkov. I'll believe that when I see it. We'll see. We'll see what's happening, folks. But if you're going to take everything the government is telling you verbatim and you believe it all, well, hey, just remember, the Germans believed everything they heard up until the time Hitler stuck a gun in his mouth. So, y'all take it easy. Bye.